Hey everyone, welcome to our ICCR webinar for September. While we're waiting for everyone to join, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, maybe tell us where you're from so we'll know who all is being represented today. Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Lots of folks from all over the US today. Thank y'all for joining us. So, my name is Lacey Hensley, and I'm the director of the Institute for Coordinated Community Response. And we're so excited to have you today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you do have a question, please use the Q&A box. I'll be monitoring that for today's speaker, and he will be taking questions throughout the presentation today. We also invite you to use the chat feature to provide comments and interact with other attendees. If you have any technical difficulties, you'll select the host and panelist option, and I will do my best to try to assist you. Just a little bit about ICCR. Were created in 2018 as a program of the Conference on Crimes Against Women. ICCR is a training and technical assistance program whose mission is to work alongside rural communities to improve their collaborative systemic responses to domestic violence. We do that through our training efforts are geared towards the needs of rural practitioners. But in all of our trainings, we work to center the unique needs and strengths of rural communities while providing practical skills and tools that can be immediately implemented. And you can learn more about that at our website, www.instituteccr.org. And I encourage you to check out all of our upcoming trainings that we provide throughout the year. Now on to today's presentation. Today we have a longtime friend of ICCR, Justin Boardman. So retired Detective Justin Boardman was in law enforcement for 15 years, all with the West Valley City Police Department, Utah. Mr. Boardman co-authored, along with Donna Kelly, a trauma-informed victim interview protocol for adult victims of sexual assault. This new protocol uses the neurobiology of trauma to gain additional information for this investigation. This process has been studied and been shown to increase prosecutions along with procedure changes. Mr. Boardman presents and consults nationally and internationally on a variety of subjects. Recently, he left active police work to focus on culture change within the community. All right. Well, thanks for being here, Justin. I'm going to stop sharing, and you are welcome to take it away. Oh, need to unmute.
How's that? Okay. Thanks. So, yeah, maybe at some point I need to update that that bio a little bit. So recently was 5 years ago when I left active police work, and the protocol has been around for now 13 or so years. So that's exciting. We've seen a lot of changes over the last decade or so when it comes to this sort of subject matter and training. So I've seen people sign in. There's all sorts of fun places. Certainly I saw UDVC, which are some of my old compadres from from Utah. I also saw a bunch from Idaho and the Rigby area, which I lived last year up in Idaho Falls for a year. I have been living from an RV for the last 3 years-ish, except for the short time in Idaho. I'm now in Kansas. And so let's see here. Well, I'm excited to get going and talk to you guys about mindfulness and resiliency and how it applies to our work and how it applies to our work for our MDTs. So our SART teams or our CCRs or whatever you want to call your multidisciplinary team. So during this, we'll use the chat feature, and we'll also use the question and answers. So if you have questions while I'm yapping, just put them in the questions and answers. And then it's very hard to have discussions, right, in this sort of format. So I will be asking some questions, and we can use the chat feature for that. Those will look like describing things and so on and so forth. This is not a neurobiology of trauma training, although there's going to be bits and pieces that are going to be shown from those sort of presentations. But we're going to concentrate on us and our multidisciplinary teams. So us as the individual, and then our multidisciplinary teams using mindfulness and resiliency to be more productive so we can serve the victims of domestic and sexual violence, or actually any sort of trauma, much better without doing more harm to ourselves. So let's get this going. Oh, I'm not sharing in my, let me get out of here. Let's get to the share screen. There it is. And let's jump over to here. We'll hit share. Then we are looking for there it is, slideshow from beginning. Aha, perfect. Okay, so it is afternoon in probably most places. Turn off my finger. And so today, what we're hoping to get done is we're going to be doing little exercises, just little ones, just as an introduction to this process. Do what you're comfortable with. Obviously, there's nobody monitoring the room and what you're doing behind your screen, which I would assume if you're at work, you're also doing some paperwork in the background. So there won't be a test. If you want a PDF of this presentation or the presentation itself in PowerPoint, just shoot me an email and let me know, and I'll be happy to send it out to you. So since it is after lunch and we're probably a little asleep, we're going to get started with trying to wake you up. Here we go. I'm sure the people in the hotel rooms next to me will love that. I'm currently in Kansas City today. So that's going to get us started in waking up. I even got a laugh. So I try to train through humor as much as possible. We are certainly exposed to so much secondhand trauma and firsthand trauma in the jobs that we do. And so there will be some humorous stuff, I hope. So let's get started here. One of my training partners, Leah Lutz, who used to be with the Sexual Violence Justice Institute, had me remove this picture because it bothered her so bad. So what I want to do really quickly, I want you to take a look at this photograph and see if you can pick out what it is, or Yeah, so try to orient it with your brain if you're able to do so. And yes, the optical illusion. So if you're able to pick it out, you're welcome to put that in the chat screen. Yeah, it's a dog, but which way is it oriented? Can you see it? Some people can see it. His head is sideways. Exactly. Some people have a very hard time with this, but he's basically looking over his shoulder. So there's a nose and an eyeball at the top. So the head's flipped. So it takes you a minute to hyper focus on an optical illusion like this. And as we talk today, we're going to be talking about mindfulness, obviously, and we'll have some definitions of it. But we are concentrating in the moment, right this second, at that photograph. And that is mindful. And it's a hyper focus, if you will. So, multidisciplinary team. We have values, right? We want to navigate the similarities within our system and within our jobs, as well as the differences. Sometimes with these differences, we can start ruffling each other's feathers, pun intended. And we want to be able to bring down the temperature in our meetings sometimes so that we can concentrate and hyper focus on the task at hand. So giving increased focus on whatever the subject matter in our meeting, at least at that point in time, is about. So whether it's on sexual assault exams or whether it's if we're looking at domestic violence, maybe it's the protective order process. Just saying that protective order process, how does that make you feel? I can tell you right now, it makes me hot under the collar a little bit because that is such a stressful area. So we also want to progress towards our team goals. And hopefully you have some small ones and you are celebrating your accomplishments, but also some bigger goals that we're taking the small steps to. Making sure that we're on the same page. And we want to have effective meetings. We don't want to have meetings that are just to have meetings, right? We want them to be focused and we want them to be effective and keeping to the time and keeping the temperature between disciplinaries, keeping it down to a low. So in our jobs and teams, we want to concentrate on the beauty. This is Arches National Park in Utah. I think this was December. Lee and I were doing some case file reviews down in Moab, and we were taking a hike before we started meeting, and we were talking about what our teams need and what that looks like. And we want to celebrate those small victories that we have in these teams. But can you see the beauty in this and not just the shit? Huh? Can you see that over to the left? So we thought that was kind of fun. Because sometimes we just concentrate on the crap, and that can help, that can dysregulate us and dysregulate our teams. So can you see the beauty that we have done, have accomplished, and not just the crap? So we've already had a couple little exercises. We're going to get started on another one here. What I want you to do is I want you to sit where you're at right now for a moment, and we're going to listen to ourselves. So it's going to be quiet. I want you to concentrate on how you're feeling. Are you feeling relaxed? Are you feeling stressed? So we're going to do that just for a quick second or two. So you're looking inward and you're feeling your gut. Are you feeling relaxed? Are you feeling stressed? You're welcome to throw that in the chat if you want. If not, that's cool too. But we want to be able to pay attention to what's happening inside our body and our feelings. So when you're hyper focused on that, that is part of the mindfulness. And if, all right, Josephina is feeling relaxed. That's awesome. Thank you. And we want to know and feel that within our bodies so that we can help regulate those feelings, because those feelings have all right, on the fence there in California. So we want to be able to know where our bodies are at and our feelings inside are at so that we can regulate those one way or another. Because if we get off kilter, there's a lot of issues and problems that can happen with us and our teams and us personally. Nervous. Okay. There's no wrong way or right way to feel, but just being focused on yourself. Stay off kilter. Monitor, yeah, that can stress you out too. So we're going to try to get regulated for a quick second, decompress, and we just listen to ourselves. Well, breathing is one of those things that we have to do to live, right? But breathing can help bring down the tensions. It also helps bring down conflict and gets us concentrating. What we're going to do really quickly is we're going to concentrate on our breath, and we're going to take a couple very big, deep breaths. And while we're concentrating and thinking about it, we're doing something with our bodies. That helps different hemispheres of the brain communicate with each other. And when we do that, that also helps us focus and balance out. So if you are feeling overwhelmed or anxious, this helps bring yourself into focus and helps bring down that anxiety. This is something that we do in trauma-informed victim interviews with our victims before we get started, so that we can access and come out of our reptilian brain, if you will, our defense circuitry, if you will, and then use our thinking brains and access that. So what I'm going to do really quickly, sometimes I play the video on this one. I'm not going to. I'll just talk through it. I'm talking already anyway. And so what we're going to do, you can have your eyes closed or open. It doesn't matter. If you can sit up in the chair that you're in, if you are in a chair, we're going to plant our feet on the ground, which helps keep us grounded, and it helps our posture. And we're going to empty all the air out of our lungs, and then we're going to hold it for a second or so. And then we are going to fill up our lungs. We're going to concentrate on the air filling up to the top of our lungs, where we're going to hold it for a moment, and then we're going to exhale back out. We're only going to do that a couple times, but we're going to get started now. So I want you to go ahead and blow out all the air in your lungs where it's empty. You're going to pause for a second. Now we're going to fill it back up. And we'll hold it for a second, and then we'll blow it back out. Some people will think about, they'll call it like square breathing, and they do equal sides in their mind. But we're just going to do a couple of those deep breaths. So we're going to start. And hold it. Hold it. And there we go. That's just a little thing that we can do during when we start getting off kilter. But in our meetings, this is something that we can start a meeting out with between different subject matters on the agenda, because it brings those temperatures back down, but it's also a rep to concentration, because you're going to be able to concentrate on the next subject at hand much better. You're training your brain to concentrate. Yeah, getting there. So let's think about your F response. I love all sorts of F words, but there's a bunch. And what is your F response when the crap hits the fan a little bit? So, what is the F response in this cat? Fear, absolutely. Flee, fight. So, those are all that's you, the snake or the cat. So, when this certainly I love watching TikTok, right? But we'll go back. This is an F response. So it certainly dysregulates us, but it's that area of the brain that is protecting us, that defense circuitry that's always scanning the environment for dangerous sort of things, and it keeps us alive. But you can get stuck in these ruts where that F response is happening more so than you regulating yourself. And that can cause all sorts of chemistry in your body to come off kilter. So, habits and reflexes, certainly with acute trauma, but just with secondary trauma as well. So, I mean, there's feign, there's fawn, there's a couple 4-letter F words, freeze, faint, flee, fight. There's a bunch of them out there. But it's habits and reflexes. And those habits and reflexes, if you will, help keep us safe and alive. So the reflexes in the cat kept it alive in that circumstance. Okay. So you can get caught in those. So this protection response, if you will. So sometimes it can be overwhelming. What happens to you? It increases your heart rate. When you were checking in with yourself a moment ago, there was a few people that said anxiety and stress, and that increases our heart rate and keeps us operating out of being relaxed, if you will. It increases our blood pressure, and that's not good to have an increased blood pressure for long periods of time. The response is to protect us, but we can get stuck in there if we don't learn how to regulate ourselves. So throughout today, we're talking about this, and you're going, well, okay, well, what does this do with our subject matter at hand? This interpersonal violence stuff. Well, this is to protect us, and once we know how to protect ourselves, we can help other people protect themselves, as well as help find answers to questions in a more focused and trauma-informed way. So let's do another little exercise, okay? So far, we sat with ourselves with pretty much a blank screen. We've done some breathing and felt that and emptying out our lungs. We were thinking between both hemispheres of the brain, feelings and sensations. So now we're going to do a texture sort of exercise. This is another easy one to do in our meetings or just with yourself. So we can do this in a bunch of different ways. So maybe the room that you're in right now has carpeting in it. Maybe the flooring is tile. Maybe there's something in your hands, a fidget toy or something like that. I've got a water bottle lid. And I want you to concentrate down on that carpet or at something in your hands. And I want you to go, what is there a texture? Is the nap low on the carpet? What does it feel like when you run your fingers across? Is it rough? Is it soft? And we're hyper concentrating just on the carpet for a moment. And maybe it's got different, maybe it has different ridges in the carpet. So you can feel that texture. You can see the texture in it. Maybe you have a notebook on your desk. Does that paper have a texture? Is it rougher? Is it pretty smooth? Has it been processed really smooth? Maybe the spine of that notebook is one of those spiral ones. If you run your fingers down that spine, is there a texture? Is there a rhythm that you feel? Maybe it's cold, maybe it's warm, maybe it's been sitting in the sunlight. So you're feeling that, you're hyper concentrating on that texture. A chair. So in SART team meetings, I'll often just pick up a chair and put it on a table, and we're going to talk about the texture of the chair. We're going to talk about the smooth texture of maybe the metal or the cushion, the fabric. What does that feel like? And we're going to hyper concentrate on that again. Maybe it's a pen. There's probably a pen on your desk right now. So if you pick that up, are there different textures on the pen? In this one, does the rubber feel different than the metal or the plastic even? Is there a texture under the clip, right, where the metal is folded up, where it will catch onto your shirt if you put it in the pocket? Is there a texture? So you are hyper concentrating on your sensations and how you feel about this. Okay. And now you've just done a rep, if you will, and your brain has gone from concentrating maybe on my voice and what I'm talking about to hyper concentrating on that lid of a water bottle and the ridges that it has on it, and maybe it's still wet on the inside. When we do that, we are training our brain to hyper concentrate on a task or what's happening right now in the moment. And you can also tap into your body and how it feels. So if you're off kilter a little bit, maybe you have a stomach ache, maybe something like that, right? So that's another easy exercise to do that. So we're going after our subconscious brain, and we're trying to get those habits and those neural pathways for those habits to happen subconsciously. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and it's called Blink, and it talks a whole bunch about the subconscious and how it's there to protect us, but all sorts of really cool stuff in that book. It's on Audible. I listen to books. I rarely have time to read. So, control. Control makes us feel safe when we're in control of our environment. If your subconscious brain is in control, it helps us make us feel safe. And so we want to concentrate on that. Because the future, right, is unknown. And thinking about the future can make us feel unsafe. You know, what, if anything, in your casework that you're going to work on after this, does that bring up bad feelings? When it does that, it's making us feel unsafe. So this subconscious brain is always working, and it's a problem solver. So it's always looking for ways to solve problems, and it's always going, and it works so fast. It actually just runs most of our everyday, is that subconscious brain, that defense circuitry, if you will. And it keeps us moving forward, but it can also hijack stuff sometimes when we get off kilter. So it can hijack our rational brains. That's why if we're doing these reps and these little exercises a lot, it will become second nature and will help calm us down. This area of the brain works much faster. I've heard the number before, but it was astronomical. It works so much faster than our rational brain that we can't even tell that it's working most of the time. It's just always going. Even when we're asleep, it's going. So we want to be able to move ourselves to the rational brain so we can make better decisions. So perception is reality. When I train, especially the neurobiology of trauma about our survivors and our victims and the interview, perception is reality. And our perception is our reality. And your coworker from another disciplinary team within these meetings, their perception is their reality. And a lot of times, since our subconscious brain works so hard and so much faster, it's the subconscious brain perception is reality, not so much your rational brain, your prefrontal cortex. Okay, it's kind of cool stuff. So that's smoke detector, your subconscious brain, defense circuitry. So it's all those structures, the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, all of that stuff. But I'm a 4-letter words and bright colors kind of guy. So if you want to know more about those other things, that's great. I can send you information if you need it. But the smoke detector encompasses all of that. And it's always looking out for, and it detects smoke. And once the smoke gets too bad, it will go off. It will hijack your irrational brain and take over. And its perception is its reality. It's there to keep you safe. So we want to try to keep the smoke away from the smoke detector when we're talking to other people or when we're communicating within our meetings. We want to keep those tensions down. And we do that through mindfulness and resiliency sort of training or exercises, if you will.
Hey, Justin, we do have a question.
Oh, okay.
Someone asked, can we find a way to make the future exciting instead of scary?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can we find a way to make the future exciting instead of scary?
Oh, I think we can. And I think that we do that by celebrating some of the smaller, as a group, as a multidisciplinary team. I think we do that by celebrating the small victories and keep setting new goals as we reach these smaller ones, and keep one out in the future, a bigger goal, if you will. Maybe that's a statute change. Maybe that is a new policy or procedure within our professions. And then we celebrate the smaller ones, and we keep up with the mindfulness and resiliency, so that we're mindful of our goals and that we can concentrate on the feelings when we do hit something good, right? We can pause for a moment at a beginning of a meeting and do a breathing exercise or just a quiet exercise, and concentrate and hyper concentrate on how it feels to have some success. So I believe so. I hope that answers the question. We'll keep going.
Okay, a second part of that is the subconscious a part of the midbrain?
So the subconscious, so the midbrain. Hmm. You know, there's so many different structures in the brain. I am not a neuroscientist. And so to answer that correctly, I would have to do some research. I concentrate more on the prefrontal cortex and then the stress or the subconscious. So midbrain stuff, you're out of my pay grade a little bit. So I want to be honest there. Um, so hope that kind of at least answers that question. Short answer, I don't know. So stress. So even just saying the word stress, we can feel that dysregulate. Um, that stress that you have when you are behind somebody that's paying with pennies, right? This is a clip from Mad TV, but this is the coffee guy. But sometimes you just want to get mad and you just want to let it go, right? The stress from here and going, come on, hurry up, right? And we get to there, and then we're like, oh my goodness. And we end up here. And this is how we interact with the world if we don't know how to regulate how we're feeling behind them. Or somebody who still writes checks. Absolutely. So how do you come out of this? So for me, I've had to work on the mindfulness stuff, especially from my past training as an officer. We work at a different stress frequency, hypervigilance, if you will. But a lot of times I will close my eyes and just start concentrating on what I'm hearing when I'm in line. Certainly, a lot of us, the hypervigilance won't allow us to do that, but that's when we might start thinking about textures or what we're seeing and hyper concentrated on stuff. And when we do that, it puts us in the moment so we can regulate ourselves better. But writing checks, ain't that the truth? So stress. We all have a ton of stress in our jobs. These couple slides are more about the nursing field, but at least the photographs are. But sometimes we have long overnight shifts. Maybe we are getting called out to be an advocate in a sexual assault exam. Maybe we're doing the sexual assault exam. Maybe we work graveyards or call outs, right? We all, for the most part, in the justice system have very high caseloads. And that can stress us out and we start getting frustrated. But probably if you're concentrating on your gut right now, maybe you are starting to go, ooh, I got stuff to do. And your mind is wandering off to your caseload right now. And your frustrations with short staffing because we can't get staffed up. That's building this stress, if you will. You have an unpredictable work environment. Maybe you are working on paperwork, then all of a sudden you get a call out, or now there's an emergency. So that starts building up the stress and anxiety and your heart rate and your blood pressure. Ooh, role confusion, right? That gets me going a little bit as well. Expectation is it's going to be a smooth ride, but in all reality, it's not. There's unrealistic expectations. We feel lack of control, and if our subconscious brain wants to be in control, right? That smoke detector wants to be in control. Unreasonable demands. This causes bad type of stress, especially if it's ongoing. So the mindfulness helps bring us out of that. And it helps us with effective multidisciplinary team meetings. So when we have an effective meeting, we want to have clear roles and responsibilities. So who is running our meeting today? Is it a co-chair? Is it the chair? Or maybe you've delegated it to somebody else for this meeting. But they have clear responsibilities that they need to be mindful of as well. We want to value people's expertise and their time and their energy. So with an effective meeting, having a time that you're going to start and a time that you're going to end, and you stick to it. Even if the conversation is not done with, when I used to run the SART team in Salt Lake County in Utah, we adhered to those boundaries. We went from 12 o'clock noon till 1:30. And at 1:30, even if we were involved in a conversation, we would stop and excuse anybody who wanted to head out or needed to head out. And then we resumed if people wanted to continue the conversation. But you want to value people's time and expertise. And certainly maintain our momentum and our decision points. Let's see here. Here we go. And if you do not have team values, maybe we need to get concentrated and find out what those are and get those made up. You want a good handful of values that your team shares. So this worry loop, we can get stuck in as individuals, even as multidisciplinary teams. And so there might be a traumatizing experience. I remember back in the day where we had two sets of sexual assault nurse examiner organizations, and there would be a lot of conflict within the SART team during the meeting itself, and that could become traumatic. And then we have a tendency, right, to self-protect. That's what that smoke detector is doing. It's protecting us. And then if we have a lack of self-care or a lack of mindfulness, that builds this tension and disrupts, we could end up having trust issues. You can have anxiety. I don't want to go to the SART meeting today. Last time I went, it was unpleasant. We didn't get anything accomplished. And we argued the whole time. So that worry loop, you have these what ifs. You might feel on edge. And then physically, you'll have this heightened stress and these hormones and these bodily reactions. So when we are doing our little exercises, if you will, you're feeling inside what's happening and when to regulate, or maybe you can sense other people's discomfort and their body reactions. And maybe it's time at this point to step back and do something else entirely different, whether it be a breathing exercise or a texture exercise or many of the other ones that we're going to go through here in a bit. So want to break this worry loop, right? So how do we do that? Well, obviously, I've been talking about all sorts of the exercises, if you will. So these methods and mechanisms, it helps shift us back to the present instead of worrying about stuff in the past or in the future. You're concentrating on a moment by moment situation. So personal experience wise, I didn't have these skills at the beginning of my career. It was only the last maybe 2 years that I was serving the city of West Valley did I learn these skills. And I can honestly tell you it changed the way that I policed and communicated with people and communicated with people within the SART team, but it also saves lives. It saved my life, but it had also saved other people's lives because this moment by moment concentration can slow things down, and you can hyper concentrate and solve the problem or find other ways. So with me, it was a domestic. I almost shot and killed a woman about 2 months before I left my job to do this stuff full time. And the only reason that lady is alive is because in the moment I could hyper concentrate when she was reaching for the gun that she was unable to reach it, but by only a half inch, maybe an inch. In a previous, if that happened 2 or 3 years earlier when I didn't have the mindfulness, more likely than not, I would have ended her life. And so it can be life and death, or it can be smaller situations, but those smaller situations, as we know, can build up. We're going to talk about that build up stuff. Yeah, it is kind of heavy, sorry. But it's so important to our work. So in the justice reform field, we've been talking about the neurobiology of trauma for over a decade in our field. And certainly the psychology field much longer than that, right? That's phase two, I believe, is the neurobiology. Phase one is this mindfulness and resiliency. If we're unable to regulate ourselves and we become sick, then that's not going to help anybody in the future if we're not taking care of ourselves, especially in this field. So of course, we talk about our roller coaster of life a lot. And we have this deep psychological need to return to baseline, to return to normal. So if we talk about this roller coaster, you can see how it works with our victims, especially in domestic violence. Well, sexual assault as well. But we have this psychological need to return back to normal. So if we have a really high high or a really low low, we want to get back up to baseline. So this high high right up here, that can be something really good. But maybe that's a big high anxiety as well that throws us off kilter. And then our low lows, we want to return back to that horizon line, that midway place. So with our victims, it might look like if they have called and entered the justice system on a domestic, and now all of a sudden they realize that the money support is sitting in jail. That person is now harassing them. They just want to get back to normal. They might try to exit the justice system. Absolutely, I get it, right? Maybe this is when a survivor of sexual assault recants and tries to get out of the system because the people that they are talking to don't understand them or what's going on. But we have this strong need to get back to baseline. So with those of us in this field, maybe that looks like, I had a really bad day today. When I get home tonight, I'm going to have, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 glasses of wine to get back up to baseline and to relax. Maybe some people that is going to the gym and that might be beneficial to them, but they want to get back to baseline. But if you continue to do that, that's where we start getting some substance use disorders and sometimes very unhealthy habits is trying to get back to baseline. People that practice this mindfulness stuff a lot may not drink as much anymore. They may not eat as much anymore because they can hyper concentrate and those neural pathways are built that they can feel full and they don't overeat. Things like that. There's all sorts of cool stuff that comes along with practicing this. So the stress response, hypervigilance. Hypervigilance is an adaptation to stress. In my profession, we are taught hypervigilance in the police academies, that everybody's going to kill us so that we don't work at regular baseline anymore. When we go to work or even at home, we're operating above, so that hypervigilance is there, which is also one of those check marks for PTSD. And so we are given PTSD in the police academies, then we're given a gun and then told to be social workers. That's not that doesn't have a good outcome most of the time. And so throughout our careers, you can see what happens to us physically, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but also what happens to our public when that happens. So these health problems and death, in my field, that means a lot of heart disease. It means a lot of high blood pressure and all those sort of health problems towards the end of our careers. So cortisol. So if you look at an officer right when they enter their jobs, they're usually pretty fit because they've been through the police academy. They've had to do all these sort of things to keep fit. But then you look at them at the end of their career, and a lot of us have these kind of guts going on. Well, a lot of that is the cortisol from living through hypervigilance and the stress. And with that comes all the other health problems that comes along with that body fat or stress and so on and so forth. This causes certainly stress and harm to the people that we serve, but also our families, not just us. It can have harm to our families. Maybe I don't feel like going out and playing with the kids anymore. I physically can't do it. That's causing some harm. There's a ripple effect. There's a domino effect to this stress and not taking care of it properly. So our quality of life can go down. What are the financial costs to our society, right? So if you think about that, if we become unhealthy because of the way that we've been dealing with stress, you are entering the health system a ton. You're going to the hospital a ton, emergency rooms. Then sometimes we're trying to control this through medications. I've been on cholesterol medication basically for the last 30 some odd years. So there's financial costs to this stress and not being able to keep regulated. So if we looked at these cortisol levels throughout our careers, again, this is not scientific. This is graphed by Justin and 4-letter words in bright colors, right? But if you have a 20-year career in our type of jobs, from advocacy to nursing to policing to prosecution, in our high caseloads, you might see your cortisol levels do this over the years. Maybe it starts off low, 5 or 10 years into your job, it's getting a little bit higher because the stress just accumulates in our bodies. And over the years, you get unhealthier and unhealthier and unhealthier until when it's time to retire, a lot of people will have heart attacks and pass away shortly after retirement. Then our humanity, when we all got into this field, right? Our humanity is way up high. We're going to change the world. We're going to go out and do lots of great things. And then after a while of getting kicked down, our humanity starts to go down, right? Now I don't really want to go out and do a call out, but I guess I'll go. And maybe a couple more years are like, yeah, these people are starting to drive me a little nuts. And you know what? My coworkers are all jerks, right? And then maybe you're here like, I hate most everybody, and then I really hate everyone. So if you look at this roller coaster ride, we want to stay at baseline as best as we can. So if you look at it, you might have your cortisol levels start off low and they go up, and our humanity levels will go down. So we get unhealthier and ornerier if we're not regulating ourselves. Again, this is not a scientific study, but you can see this throughout our careers. It's kind of interesting. So when I really started to notice this was, for me, it would have been, I don't know, 2013 or so, 2014. And this is outside of Torrey, Utah. And my old man and I actually had a weekend off. We went hiking. He has a place down along that green belt, if you will, that he was getting ready because he was about ready to retire. And we're up here on this perch, listening to the wind, the ravens in the background. So if you can kind of imagine that. And we're talking. He's like, gosh, this is just beautiful. I love this. You know, the starkness, the wide open spaces is just relaxing to me. And this is why I worked so hard over the years, is so that I could afford a little place like this and hang out, you know, my final years. And I'm standing there and I'm kind of close to the edge, and I look down and go, what if a body fell off of here? What would happen? They'd probably hit that rock down there. They'd go into a bunch of different pieces. Then the coyotes are going to come, and then they're going to scatter them, everybody. And how do you get a body out of here? I mean, you're going to have to helicopter it or what? And you know, it was something I was thinking about. And he turns to me and goes, dude, you are effed up. I never heard my dad use the F word before. I giggled. It was funny. But yeah, I am kind of messed up. And, you know, we do a lot of that stuff to protect us. Our humor is bad to also help protect us. But I hadn't been doing the maintenance I needed to do mentally to keep me healthy and to talk with other people that are not in our fields. And so I had to take a look at myself and internally on what I'm doing to keep myself healthy. So the main types of trauma, certainly the acute, exactly, our effed up humor. But it's something that is important for us to have in those small moments because it does keep us going. I see that there's a hand raised. Do we want to answer that or keep going?
Yeah, I allowed Stephanie to talk if she has a question.
Yeah.
It may have been a mistake, though. Who knows?
Okay, cool. Well, they can raise their hand again or throw a question in there and we'll stop and answer it. So acute trauma results from a single incident usually. So that might be a sexual assault. Maybe that's a car crash. Maybe it's you responding to a shooting. Maybe it is something, whatever it may be. But acute trauma usually comes from a single event. Chronic is repeated and prolonged, right? So like domestic violence or abuse or anything else like that. Complex is when we start shuffling those two together in secondary trauma, right? Because I would put the chronic trauma as secondary. But it can all just it's invasive, right? So it can affect our souls. It can affect the way that we interact with other people. So another main trauma, especially mine in my career, administration, right? I'm just kidding, especially if you're administrators out there. But yeah, there's all sorts of different types of trauma that affect us and start building up on us. I always butted head with administration, but that's half the fun, right? Authorities to be questioned. Vicarious trauma, which most of us are experiencing largely and always on a day-to-day basis, and it builds up. So so it can cause a negative reaction and affect us in a bunch of different psychosocial sort of symptoms. So I might withdraw from my friend group. Yes, says the cop. Absolutely. I always questioned the authority of sergeants and so on and so forth. I wasn't the greatest person to manage, but oh well. So vicarious trauma is passing along trauma from a survivor to us or vice versa, and it just keeps building up. And this is what most of us in this field experience. And it can also have a devastating effect on our health and the way that we treat other people and the way that we treat our families. So among first responders, there's been a lot of studies out there, and first responders, which I am counting advocacy certainly as a first responder. They don't get the credit that they need or deserve when it comes to this sort of thing. But when they've studied these, the prevalence shows that among the first responders. So, you know what, it's easier for me just to read this one out. So across 40 to 80% of helping professionals experience a high rate of secondary trauma. So among these global studies of PTSD, they've found that those of us that are first responders had a prevalence rate of 10% had these big PTSDs compared to 4.4% of the general population. So those of us in this field are experiencing this sort of trauma and the secondary trauma at a much higher rate than the other professions. So a personal example when it comes to us personally, what can happen? So physically, how can this secondary trauma affect us? Because this also affects our multidisciplinary teams, because it affects us personally, and we're one of those puzzle pieces. So physical, emotional, and behavioral. So physical wise, we can have a rapid heartbeat, rapid breathing, headaches. It can impair our immune systems, all sorts of stuff. I'm not sure if Um, if the volume is changing, Lacey can see if it is. I'm thinking
No,
yeah,
you're good.
okay, groovy. Um, so emotional responses. We can feel powerless, a lot of anxiety, guilt, fear, anger, right? Hypersensitivity, helplessness, and physical reactions to reminders. And I see the comment down there that um, as a first responder, PTSD does last a lifetime. I've got it. I'm not ashamed of it. I talk about it a lot. It affects me a lot too. And one of the emotional ways here would be like physical reactions to reminders. There's places in West Valley City where I policed where even as an officer, I would only go through those areas if I was called there, if I had to. Nowadays, when I visit Utah, I do everything possible not to drive through the city that I used to police, just because the guttural feelings and the anxiety. So we start changing the way that we do things. And it has this domino effect on our lives and our families' lives and a lot of other people's. So irritability, sleep, appetite changes. So your hypervigilance, you can be easily startled. I was pumping gas one morning. I don't know where it was. I was returning my rental car and I'm pumping gas, right? And it was 5:30 in the morning. For some reason, flights are so dang early these days. And I'm pumping the gas in there, and somebody rides up behind me on a bike that I didn't know. And all of a sudden I jumped. I I went into a protective stance. I reached for under my shirt like I had a gun on. I haven't had a gun on in 5 years, which is honestly, it's been great. But I went for it because my neural pathways were all still there, but I was easily startled. That person goes, "Don't, no, whoa, 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 whoa," right? Thinking I'm going to shoot them. But it's those neural pathways, they're there from the PTSD. Um, so it can certainly affect us. And examples of vicarious trauma. So certainly spiritual, cognitive, and relational. So it might look like a loss of purpose, loss of meaning. You can have disillusionment, uh, certainly sarcasm, right? Um, Diminished concentration. So when we're doing mindfulness sort of exercises, we're combating that because we're learning how to hyper concentrate in the moment on things. Pessimism, self-doubt, um, unwanted distressing thoughts, uh, all of those. And you can start seeing this in your friends and your colleagues and your family. And you can start trying to help out there as well. Uh, so decreased interest in intimacy, um, intolerance, mistrust. It can all build up into horrible things that. So we need to keep this stuff in check. But how does vicarious trauma happen and affect us professionally and in our teams? So our performance, our morale, our relational, and behavior are some of the ways that it can affect us in our teams and our regular jobs. So our decrease in quality work, yeah, for sure. So difficulty with inattention. So this might be going to these meetings but not participating in a productive way, which then why are we going to these meetings and why are we doing what we're doing? So when we are doing some of these mindful exercises in our meetings, this might be the only time that your coworkers actually do some of these practices. And so it would be very helpful to them as well. Decrease in confidence, feeling undervalued, and reduced compassion. So I talk a lot about empathy and compassion. And when we are working with victims, we need genuine empathy and genuine compassion for our fellow humans, if you will. That can be dangerous, but you want genuine empathy and genuine compassion. So when we're doing mindful sort of exercises, it helps us be in the moment so that we can regulate better, and helps increase our morale, if you will. We can be withdrawn from coworkers, poor communication, the sense of I'm the only one that can do the job. Then that just piles on more work for us, and we can get more overwhelmed, and it's that worry loop, right? We talked about earlier. Maybe you're arriving late to work now. You're always exhausted. Maybe your coworkers are always calling out. Maybe you are assigned to the multidisciplinary team, the CCR or the SART team. And yeah, now you're not even going, but you're assigned and you're taking that spot up. Maybe you're driving by the location and you just go to lunch and then go back to work because now you're not participating because the way that you feel when you go there. Can you see the domino effect? Can you feel that domino effect? So what happens as we're exposed? So I think about it this way. As first responders, we go to work and this happens to us, right? We get crapped on, right? It might hit. My bald head has been a target for many times. I've been hit by birds. The last time it was in Detroit like 3 years ago. I was outside the convention I was at and got hit by a seagull. It happens, but in our jobs every day we see so much hurtful and horrible things. It's kind of like we're getting crapped on, right? And it might hit our head and we might go, ugh, and we'll wipe it off and bleh, get rid of it. But it leaves a residue behind. And then we go back to work again, and then the same bird or a different bird, but we get hit again on top of the old residue that was there before that. And we'll wipe it off. Maybe we'll go work out. Maybe we'll go do some self-care, maybe some mindfulness, and we'll get a little bit of it off. But it continues to happen. So eventually our inner selves might look like this car, right? Gross, but true. Our souls can get this buildup and we need to power wash it. And we do that by mindfulness, resiliency, even therapy. I'm a huge supporter of therapy. I'm a huge supporter of EMDR therapy because that helps chip some of that residue off our souls. So burnout, that starts showing up when we are withdrawn from our friends and families and our support systems. We lose interest, feeling helplessness. And certainly I had different bouts of that during my career. And I know a lot of advocates, nurses, attorneys that have had the same. Okay? So weight, I like to eat. I like to eat my feelings. I think there's a lot of us out there that can empathize with me there. Um, you also start getting sick much more often. Emotional and physical exhaustion. How does that affect your home life? How does that affect life outside of work? Certainly badly, and our 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 peeps, if you will, outside of work, why we do the work that we do a lot of time, are taking the brunt of our dysregulation and irritability. So, manhole covers. I go, it's kind of funny, but I mean, I'm chasing chickens with my ADHD. But manhole covers, well, what does that have to do with mindfulness? And what does that have to do with my job? Well, sometimes you can program your brain in a mindful way to concentrate on things, even if you're not normally paying attention or looking for them. One of the things that I do as a mindful exercise that is always going in my subconsciousness are manhole covers. So wherever I travel and explore, my brain is looking for manhole covers. And so even if I'm not thinking about it, I will see a manhole cover out of the side view or whatever, and I'll look at it. And if it's one that I don't have I collect photographs of manhole covers. I'll take a picture. What that does is it opens up my field of view, right? It opens up my field of view. I'm safer because my brain is always hyper concentrating on certain things. It's not hypervigilance, it's mindfulness. Hypervigilance causes all of the icky side effects and PTSD, whereas mindfulness will keep you safer and works a little bit differently. So as I travel, I start seeing more of cities than most places, right? Both the people in Idaho, here's an Idaho Falls sewer cover, and you'll see that these are works of art in their own way. Some people will look for signs. That's East Baton Rouge. That one's St. Louis. New York City. Another New York City one, but this is a Park and Rec. Birmingham, Alabama. Chicago. Hot Springs, Arkansas. Wichita, Kansas. Boston. Seattle. That one is in Italy. That is in Florence. That's in Florence. There's a Little Rock, Arkansas. There's Sugar House, Utah. St. George. So what that does is it keeps this mindful focus going.
So
And
someone wants to know why in the world you would choose manholes out of all things.
it was weird. And I started noticing that they were different in different places. And that was just something. I also do a lot of rock hounding. So that keeps you focused on little things. Maybe you decide that you want to do something like every time I watch the news, I'm going to start picking out the neurobiology of trauma. It can be all sorts of different types of exercises. But manhole covers, I don't know. I like to explore, and when I go to new towns, I usually try to go for some walks. So it'd be mindful walking, if you will. And this was just something I started doing, and it's been fun. I mean, those are just some of the better ones. I've got lots of them, but manhole covers. whatever. So it can be anything. So this mindfulness stuff, it's not new, right? It originated over 2,500 years ago in Buddhist psychology. So it's one's ability to maintain a moment to moment awareness, especially during a highly intense moment. So, and it's the skill that can be learned. So, as even subconsciously, that area of the brain is scanning the environment for manhole covers. So it's a moment by moment awareness. And when it picks up on one, it will contact my rational brain or my thinking brain, and I'll go whoop, bing. And so you can train those um, in all sorts of different ways. But it keeps us safe and it keeps us in check with how our bodies are feeling and our regulation. So maybe you are now going to concentrate on when you're stressed the most. Maybe you're stressed the most right 10 minutes before you actually make it into the office because you know what's waiting for you there. And as your body recognizes that and you start recognizing that between the hemispheres of the brain, maybe you're going to start going, well, how do I regulate this feeling before I go in? And maybe that is a mindful exercise of some sort. Maybe you turn off the car and you close your eyes for a second and then go into work and get started. And situational awareness. So instead of hypervigilance, it's situational awareness, which is much healthier. And acceptance. We want to pay attention to our thoughts and feelings. We don't want to judge those. However we feel is okay. We know that with survivors even, right? They're going to have a whole range of reactions to that trauma. And you don't judge it. Same with yourself. You need to be able to accept the way that you are. And we're all amazing organisms, if you will. There's no wrong or right way to think or even feel, but you want to be able to accept it and notice it. And if it's bad, learn ways to take care of it. And if it's good, find ways to embrace it. So the moment by moment. So our thoughts, our surrounding environments. So with the manhole cover thing going, my surrounding environment is always being scanned and looking for something that might be out of the ordinary. Our bodily sensations, our feelings, right? There's one of the most mindful jobs as first responders, are dispatchers. And often in our multidisciplinary teams, we have a tendency to forget dispatch. There's a lot of evidence that can be gleaned there, but there's a lot of trauma there. But there's a lot of, that's the first place where a lot of our survivors are entering the system. So we want to concentrate more on certainly dispatch. But they have the skill to be able to hyper concentrate on a task at hand and still take on more information. Even in our group meetings or in therapy or what have you. So we can compare it to the old cameras, right? Where you had to manually focus. I don't know if any of us can really know how to do that anymore. But as we experience this trauma, it starts to blur our worldview. And as we practice mindfulness techniques, it helps make our lives much more clear. And so then as we're concentrating on ourselves, we start also noticing our biases, or maybe we are seeing things in a blurred view, certainly biased. And over the last, I don't know, 8 years or so, I've certainly concentrated more and more on this whole thing of bias. Bias is a human condition. We all have it. And so sometimes it's good to sit with yourself and question your own biases. Certainly, we were talking earlier, administration and questioning the power, if you will. But we also need to question ourselves and how we feel. And maybe you're going to find yourself building new neural pathways that are much healthier, especially when it comes to bias. So, the steering wheel. So maybe you are thinking about mindfulness. We can give it a steering wheel, right? Certainly, looks like me running lights and sirens, but maybe all of us, how we drive, right? That anxiety starts building up, and we start. Thanks for the 3-minute warning. I didn't realize we were there. So it helps keep us on the roadway, right? But if we're not being mindful, it's kind of like driving without the steering wheel or using the steering wheel. So it makes us much happier. So another quick exercise that we can do is closing our eyes. And what that does is that takes away a sense, if you will. So if you close your eyes for a moment, more likely than not, now you're just hearing my voice. But if I'm a little bit more quiet, I can hear the refrigerator going over here. Maybe you're hearing other office type of noises, but now you're hyper concentrated on that. And that's a great exercise to do as well. But basically what we're doing is we're training our brain. And when your brain goes off and starts paying attention to something else and not the task at hand, and you bring it back to that task at hand, you're doing a rep and you're making your brain much stronger. And it helps tone down our fight and flight responses, our F responses, so that we can engage our thinking brains so that we can solve the problems at hand, even in our multidisciplinary teams. But it takes repetition, right? Although reps for me, especially in the weight room, look like this. But hopefully you don't have those same experiences, but it can be used as a conflict resolution tool. And in our meetings, sometimes we do have conflict. And so the mindfulness helps us keep regulated so that we can serve the victims that we are empowered to do, but also our families at home. And so we'll get through that here. There's also good stress. We've just talked about the bad stress, but there is good stress out there, and embracing the good stress is also good for you. It keeps you out of boredom, keeps you out of depression. It also tunes up the brain so the mindfulness stuff works much better. So stress, when it comes at you, you want to embrace it. And you want to feel through it and practice your mindfulness techniques. Now, there was a few other slides left, but again, I'm going to honor the 3 o'clock, but I'm also more than happy to send out the information that I have here to you, and you can practice from there. I'm going to kind of get down to the other one. Vicarious resilience is great stuff. Practicing the positive, right? We need to do that. And acknowledging the positive, you will get 100 times back what you put into it. The stuff that didn't get covered was doing a few more exercises, which were visual. How does that picture feel? Is there a texture to it? But as we do this, we can start being mindful and picking out the problems. So some of the places to turn to. The trauma stewardship is great. That's more on the victim advocacy side, but we're all victim advocates in our jobs. ACEs, Insight Timer is the format is an app, and it has a bunch of free stuff on there. I use it a lot. Usually it's sleep at night, so I'll fall asleep and then it just turns itself off when my phone charges. But great stuff. Mindful Badge Initiative is from retired Lieutenant Gearling, where I've learned most of my stuff. And he's an incredible resource. So I'm more than happy to send out a PDF to this. Just shoot me an email, or Lacey, and I will send her a copy as well. So hopefully, a little bit over, but I wanted to honor your guys' time. And I sure realize and appreciate the time and the comments. Hopefully, you picked up something and added another tool, right? Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
that's great. Thank you. Yes, and we will be posting the recording on our website, and we
Yep.
typically have handouts. So if you'll send it to me, then we'll post it on the website with the recording. So that'd be
Easily.
great. Thank you. All right, if you don't mind stopping sharing real quick, I'm just going to go over a couple of just a last couple few announcements. Thank you again, Justin. It was really great. Your voice is very calming. I was like,
Then everybody's
yeah,
asleep.
no, 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 no. So, all right, let me share. We do have a couple of things coming up. We have our um, rural virtual conference this Monday and Tuesday, October 2nd and 3rd. There's still time to register. If you want to check out the digital program, you can right there at the in the QR code. And then RFPs for our national conference, our Conference on Crimes Against Women, are still open through Saturday, the 30th. So if you are interested in submitting a proposal, be sure and check that out. And then finally, we opened registration this week for our big conference, May 20th through the 23rd in Dallas. Justin will be there. So feel free to check us out on the website. It's conferencecaw.org and get registered. A couple of questions about certificates. Yes, once we end the recording today or in the webinar today, there will be a link that pops up to take a survey. If you'll be sure and take that survey, it will populate in your browser. And then once you've completed the survey, you'll have the opportunity to review your certificate. And then also the survey link will be sent in a follow-up email if for whatever reason it does not populate in your browser. So we will get that recording on the website within the next couple of days. And also feel free to reach out to Justin or myself if y'all have any questions. So thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you for the 3-minute warning. I didn't realize I was getting that close.